The knock at the door startled Kieran Irving as he adjusted his tie, not expecting anyone this early for his sister's dinner party. His penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline wasn't usually open to visitors, and tonight was an exception he'd reluctantly agreed to, only because Catherine had insisted. "Coming," Kieran called out, striding across the Italian marble floors of his foyer. He swung open the door to find not his sister, but a woman with auburn hair cascading in loose waves past her shoulders, balancing what appeared to be a homemade pie in her hands. "Oh, I thought Catherine would be here already." The woman's emerald eyes widened with surprise. "I'm Emma O'Brien, Catherine's friend from the museum. She invited me to help set up before everyone arrives." Kieran stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard by both her unexpected presence and the genuine warmth in her smile. At 35, he'd long ago stopped being impressed by beautiful women. There were plenty in his world of international shipping and investment, but there was something refreshingly unpretentious about this one. "Catherine's running late, as usual," he finally said, stepping aside. "I'm Kieran, her brother." Emma stepped into the penthouse, her eyes widening as she took in the panoramic windows and minimalist design. "Wow, this place is incredible. Catherine mentioned you were successful, but this is..." She trailed off, seeming embarrassed by her reaction. "Excessive." Kieran suggested with a hint of amusement. She laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to brighten the room. "I was going to say impressive, but yes, maybe a little excessive too." He found himself smiling, something he rarely did with strangers. "The kitchen's this way. What kind of pie is that?" "Apple cinnamon with a bourbon caramel drizzle," Emma replied, following him through the living room. "Catherine said it was your favorite, though she might have been buttering me up to convince me to make it." Kieran paused, turning to look at her with renewed interest. "You made this?" "From scratch." "Is that so surprising?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "I'm the head pastry chef at Lumiere. Creating desserts is literally my job." Recognition dawned on him. Lumiere was one of New York's most acclaimed restaurants, with a waiting list months long. He dined there several times for business meetings, but had never ventured to meet the culinary team. "I've had your desserts," he said, genuinely impressed now. "The dark chocolate soufflé with the gold leaf is incredible." A pleased smile spread across Emma's face. "Thank you. It's nice to meet someone who appreciates the finer details." The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Catherine, apologizing profusely for her tardiness while carrying bags of decorations and flowers. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity as they prepared for the dinner party. Catherine's attempt to introduce her brother to more normal people outside his elite business circle. Emma moved through the kitchen with natural confidence, organizing the catering trays and adding her own touches. Kieran found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, intrigued by the way she commanded his pristine, rarely used kitchen as if it were her own domain. "Your sister says you own Irving Global Shipping," Emma said as she arranged delicate appetizers. "That must be fascinating." Kieran leaned against the counter. "It's challenging. We're expanding our clean energy fleet, which means convincing old-school industry players to embrace change." "And you enjoy the fight?" she asked, glancing up at him with genuine curiosity. He considered this. Most women he encountered were either intimidated by his wealth or calculated how to benefit from it. Emma seemed interested in him as a person. "I do," he admitted. "I like solving problems others consider impossible. My father thought modernizing the fleet was financial suicide, but we're proving otherwise." "That's admirable," Emma said, "using your position to make positive changes." Their conversation flowed easily until guests began arriving. Throughout the evening, Kieran found his attention repeatedly drawn to Emma. She chatted comfortably with everyone, from his sister's art world friends to his own business associates, without pretension. When dinner was served, Kieran ensured Emma was seated beside him. The conversation around the table was lively, but he found himself focused on her stories about culinary school in Paris and her journey to becoming a head chef at only 29. It wasn't easy, she confessed after sharing an anecdote about a kitchen disaster. The restaurant industry isn't exactly welcoming to women in leadership positions. How did you handle it? Kieran asked, genuinely curious. By being better than everyone else, she said simply. And by not compromising who I am. I could have adopted the aggressive style many male chefs use, but that's not me. I found my own way to command respect. Kieran nodded, understanding perfectly. That's always the challenge, isn't it? Succeeding on your own terms. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different worlds. After dessert featuring Emma's spectacular apple pie, which prompted demands for the recipe, guests migrated to the living room. Kieran watched as Emma slipped out onto his terrace. Following an impulse, he grabbed 2 glasses of whiskey and joined her. She turned at his approach, the city lights creating a halo around her silhouette. I needed some air. Your sister's friends are wonderful, but it gets overwhelming. I understand completely, he said, offering her a glass. I'm not particularly social myself. Emma accepted the drink with a smile. Catherine mentioned you had to be dragged into hosting this. She exaggerates, Kieran said, though they both knew it was true. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their whiskey and watching the city below. When Emma shivered slightly in the evening breeze, Kieran removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders without thinking. Thank you, she said softly, pulling it closer. Such a gentleman. Don't tell anyone, he replied with a hint of humor. It would ruin my ruthless businessman reputation. Emma laughed. Your secret's safe with me. By the time the party ended, Kieran had learned more about Emma O'Brien than he'd intended. Her childhood in Boston with Irish immigrant parents who ran a neighborhood bakery, her scholarship to culinary school, her dream of opening her own restaurant someday. He found himself sharing details of his own life he rarely discussed, like his fears when taking over the family business at 25 after his father's heart attack. As the last guests departed, Emma helped Catherine gather her things. I should go too, she said, returning Kieran's jacket. Early morning at the restaurant tomorrow. I'll call you a car, Kieran offered. No need, Emma replied. The subway's just a few blocks away. At this hour, absolutely not, Kieran insisted. I'll take you home myself. Catherine raised an eyebrow at her brother's unusual offer, but wisely said nothing. The ride to Emma's apartment in Brooklyn was quiet but comfortable. When they arrived, Kieran walked her to the door of her building, a renovated industrial space in a gentrifying neighborhood. Thank you for tonight, Emma said. Your sister was right, you're not nearly as intimidating as the business magazines make you out to be. Is that a compliment or an insult to my business persona? Kieran asked with a smile. Definitely a compliment to the man, Emma replied. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, Kieran considered asking to see her again. Instead, he simply nodded. Good night, Emma O'Brien. Good night, Kieran Irving. The next morning, Kieran couldn't focus on work. Images of Emma kept interrupting his concentration, her laugh, the intelligent spark in her eyes, the way she'd stood on his terrace looking out at the city with wonder rather than calculation. After rescheduling 2 meetings, he made an impulsive decision. That evening, he walked into Lumiere without a reservation, something that would normally be impossible. The maitre d' recognized him immediately. Mr. Irving, we weren't expecting you. I'm afraid we're fully booked tonight. I'm not here to dine, Kieran said. I'd like to speak with your head pastry chef, Emma O'Brien. The maitre d' looked surprised but nodded. Of course, please wait a moment. 10 minutes later, Emma emerged from the kitchen, still in her chef's coat, flour dusting one cheek. Her expression registered shock, then pleasure at seeing him. Kieran, is everything okay? Everything's fine, he assured her. I just wanted to ask if you'd have dinner with me. Not here, obviously. Somewhere else when you're free. Emma blinked, clearly surprised. You came all the way here to ask me out. I did, Kieran admitted. I don't have your number and I didn't want to ask Catherine for it. That seemed juvenile. A slow smile spread across Emma's face. So instead, you showed up at my workplace without warning. That's much more mature." Kieran laughed, acknowledging the absurdity. "I'll admit I didn't think this through. I'm not usually impulsive." "I'm free Sunday evening," Emma said. "We close early." "Sunday it is," Kieran replied, feeling an unexpected lightness. "I'll pick you up at 7. For their first date, Kieran chose a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, far from the high-profile establishments where he might be recognized. Emma arrived wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes appear even greener, her hair loose around her shoulders. "No private dining room at per se," she teased as they were seated at a corner table. "I thought you might prefer somewhere with actual food rather than artistic arrangements of foam and microgreens," Kieran replied. Emma's laugh was bright. "You'd be surprised how many men try to impress me with fancy restaurants, not realizing I'm analyzing every dish with a professional eye." "I'm not trying to impress you," Kieran said honestly. "I just want to get to know you better." The evening passed effortlessly. They discussed everything from books to travel, discovering shared interests in historical fiction and coastal destinations. Emma was refreshingly direct, challenging his opinions without confrontation. For Kieran, accustomed to people deferring to him, her honesty was invigorating. When the topic turned to family, Emma spoke lovingly of her parents and younger brother. "Dad still wakes up at 4 every morning to bake bread for the shop, even though they could afford to hire help now. He says good bread needs love in every loaf." "They sound wonderful," Kieran said. "Very different from my father. He believed business was business, emotions were weakness." "And what do you believe?" Emma asked, studying him intently. Kieran considered the question. "I used to think he was right. Now I'm not so sure." Their first date led to a second, then a third. They fell into an easy rhythm of meeting whenever their busy schedules aligned. Emma introduced Kieran to hidden culinary gems throughout the city, family-owned ethnic restaurants, underground supper clubs, artisan bakeries open only at dawn. Kieran, in turn, showed her places few got to see: a private sunset sail around Manhattan, an after-hours tour of a renowned art collection, a helicopter ride to a vineyard for lunch. 3 months into their relationship, Catherine cornered her brother after a family dinner. "You're falling for her, aren't you?" Kieran didn't bother denying it. "Is it that obvious?" "You smile now," his sister said simply. "I don't think I've seen you this happy since we were kids." The realization startled him. It was true, Emma had brought something unexpected into his life. It wasn't just her beauty or intelligence, but her perspective. She saw the world differently, valuing experiences over possessions, relationships over status. Being with her made him question priorities he'd long taken for granted. Their first serious disagreement came when Emma was offered the opportunity to help open a new restaurant in Chicago. The 6-month commitment would mean a long-distance relationship, just as things were becoming serious. "You should take it," Kieran said immediately when she told him. "It's a great opportunity," Emma frowned. "You don't seem concerned about us being apart." "Of course I am," he replied, confused by her reaction. "But your career matters. I can visit often. I have business interests in Chicago anyway." "Is that how you solve all problems?" "By throwing money and resources at them?" Emma asked, a edge to her voice he'd never heard before. The argument that followed was illuminating for both of them. Emma explained her fear that Kieran saw their relationship as just another aspect of life he could manage efficiently. Kieran, in turn, admitted he was afraid of holding her back from her dreams, of becoming like his father who had expected Kieran's mother to sacrifice everything for the Irving family business. "I don't want you to resent me," he finally said. 6 months is nothing if it gives you what you want." Emma's expression softened. "What if what I want is complicated? What if I want both the opportunity and for us to figure out how to make this work together, not just with convenient solutions?" It was a turning point. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Kieran couldn't simply solve a problem with money or influence. They talked late into the night, really communicating rather than just exchanging words. Emma ultimately took the Chicago position, but they agreed to alternate weekend visits, with Kieran adjusting his schedule to make it work. The months apart were challenging but strengthened their relationship in unexpected ways. They learned to communicate more effectively, to prioritize quality time, to appreciate each other's independence while building a connection that transcended distance. When Emma returned to New York permanently, their reunion felt like the beginning of something deeper. Kieran had used the time to reflect on what he truly wanted, beyond the next business acquisition or financial milestone. On their one-year anniversary, Kieran took Emma back to his penthouse, where they'd first met. He'd transformed the terrace into a garden of lights and flowers with a table set for an intimate dinner. "You cooked?" Emma asked incredulously, seeing the elaborate meal with professional supervision, Kieran admitted. "Your sous chef Marcel is terrifying but effective." Emma laughed. "You went to my restaurant and convinced Marcel to teach you how to cook." "It took considerable negotiation and a very expensive bottle of cognac," Kieran confirmed. "Worth it to see your expression right now." After dinner, they stood at the railing overlooking the city, reminiscent of their first evening together. The spring air was warm, scented with the flowers surrounding them. "I have something to ask you," Kieran said, turning to face Emma. "This past year has changed everything for me. Before you, I measured success in numbers and acquisitions. Now I understand what was missing." Emma's eyes widened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside was a ring featuring an emerald surrounded by diamonds, the green stone perfectly matching her eyes. "I'm not offering you wealth or status," Kieran continued. "I'm offering partnership in every sense of the word. I want to build a life with you, Emma O'Brien. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Emma's eyes. "Are you sure? Your world and mine are so different." "That's exactly why it works," Kieran said. "You see things I miss, value what I overlooked. You've made me better as a businessman, as a brother, as a man." Emma took his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 6 months later on the Massachusetts coast, a compromise between Kieran's preference for privacy and Emma's desire for family involvement. They exchanged vows in a historic lighthouse overlooking the Atlantic, with Catherine as maid of honor and Emma's brother as best man. The reception combined elegant simplicity with personal touches. Emma's parents provided artisan breads and pastries, while Kieran arranged for sustainable seafood from boats in his company's small-scale fishing program. Their honeymoon was a month-long journey through Europe, visiting not the expected luxury destinations, but places significant to both their heritages: Ireland, where Emma's family originated; Germany, home to Kieran's maternal ancestors; the small French town where Emma had first fallen in love with baking during a childhood vacation. Upon returning to New York, they faced their first major decision as a married couple: where to live. Emma loved her Brooklyn neighborhood with its community feel and proximity to local markets. Kieran's penthouse offered convenience to his office and the security he preferred. The solution came unexpectedly when they discovered a historic brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, needing extensive renovation. Together, they transformed it into a home that reflected both their tastes: Kieran's appreciation for clean lines and technology, blending with Emma's warmth and artistic sensibility. The garden level became a test kitchen where Emma could experiment with recipes for what would eventually become her own restaurant. 18 months after their wedding, Emma's dream became reality with the opening of Hearth, a restaurant focusing on elevated comfort food with seasonal, sustainable ingredients. Many of her suppliers came through Kieran's shipping contacts, creating a farm-to-table network that became a model for the industry. Kieran surprised her by arranging for her parents to attend the opening night, flying them in from Boston and putting them up in the city's finest hotel. "You didn't have to do that," Emma said, overwhelmed by the gesture. "They should see what their daughter has accomplished," Kieran replied simply. "Besides, your father promised to teach me his sourdough technique while they are here." Emma's restaurant quickly earned critical acclaim, eventually receiving a Michelin star. Simultaneously, Kieran's company completed its transition to fully sustainable shipping practices, earning international recognition for environmental leadership. Their professional successes, however, paled in comparison to their personal joy when Emma discovered she was pregnant. The news came as they celebrated their third wedding anniversary, adding another layer of meaning to the occasion. "Are you happy?" Emma asked as they lay in bed that night, her head on his chest, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," Kieran answered honestly. "If someone had told me the night of Catherine's dinner party that the woman bringing apple pie would completely transform my life, I would never have believed it." Emma smiled against his skin. "And if someone had told me the intimidating billionaire with the spectacular view would become the center of my world, I would have laughed them out of the kitchen." "We were both wrong in the best possible way," Kieran murmured, pulling her closer. The pregnancy brought changes to their busy lives. Kieran delegated more responsibility to his executive team, determined to be present through every step. Emma scaled back her hours at Hearth, training her staff to maintain standards without her constant presence. Their daughter, Lily, arrived on a snowy December morning, tiny and perfect with Emma's green eyes and Kieran's dark hair. Holding her for the first time, Kieran experienced an emotion he'd never known existed: a fierce, protective love that simultaneously terrified and exhilarated him. "She's going to change everything again, isn't she?" he whispered to Emma as they watched their daughter sleep. "That's what love does," Emma replied, squeezing his hand. "It keeps changing us for the better." The following years brought the expected challenges of balancing demanding careers with family life, but they navigated them together. When Lily was 2, they welcomed a son, James, completing their family. Their home became the center of holidays and gatherings, with Catherine joking that she deserved credit for their happiness since she'd organized the fateful dinner party. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Emma with a journal he'd kept since they met, documenting his perspective on their journey together. The final entry read, "5 years ago, I thought I had everything I needed: success, wealth, independence. I was completely wrong. What I needed was you, showing me that true wealth lies in connections, in vulnerability, in building something meaningful together. Thank you for walking into my life with apple pie and showing me what really matters." Emma's response was to lead him to the kitchen, where she'd recreated the exact pie she'd brought to Catherine's dinner party. "To remind us how something simple can lead to something extraordinary," she explained. As they shared the pie, watching their children play in the garden through the kitchen window, Kieran reflected on how completely his life had changed course. The billionaire who once measured worth in assets and acquisitions now found his greatest joy in Sunday morning pancake making with flour-covered children, in listening to Emma describe her latest culinary experiment, in the ordinary moments that composed an extraordinary life. "What are you thinking?" Emma asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "That I never thought Catherine's dinner guest would be my forever," Kieran admitted, "but somehow you became everything I never knew I was missing." Emma leaned over to kiss him, tasting of cinnamon and apples and the promise of many more years together. "Forever is just beginning," she whispered against his lips. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Kieran knew with absolute certainty that no business success, no financial achievement could ever compare to the richness of loving and being loved by Emma O'Brien.